Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety, alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll talk with Variety chief correspondent Daniel D'Addario about his cover story on Channing Tatum and director Derek Cianfrance and their new movie, Roofman. Variety's cheeky cover line for this is, "I don't want to grow up," and Dan will explain why. We'll also hear from the one and only Elsa Keslassy, Variety's international editor, on what was happening at a busy and buzzy Venice Film Festival. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Google shares are up in early trading. The search giant had been facing pressure to sell off its Chrome browser division as a result of an antitrust decision against parent company Alphabet last year. The judge's ruling, issued Tuesday, allows Google to keep Chrome, but it will have to share more data with rivals. Good news for the paper, it's been renewed for season 2. And that comes one day before season 1 premieres on Peacock. It's the new venture in the vein of The Office from Greg Daniels and Universal Television. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. Now we turn to conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Dan D'Addario joins me to talk about a movie that tells the story of a modern-day crime that is emblematic of our times. Before we hear from Dan, let's hear a clip from Variety's cover story video. Here, Channing Tatum and Derek Cianfrance explain how they forged a working partnership on Roofman. The dark comedy from Paramount Pictures premieres Saturday at the Toronto Film Festival.
I didn't really know what to expect about, because I've seen his other movies, and I talked to Bradley Cooper about like your style. He kind of prepped me a little bit for like the long takes and like really unorthodox things. He told me about the silent take. And so I had at least a little bit of knowledge, but it, again, like when you think it's done, you're halfway there. Like when you're like, we've done everything. I think we've done everything. I don't have any more ideas. We've only gotten halfway there. And because you were just a relentless digger.
If you're making a film, there's no greater ally than Channing for a filmmaker. When you're making a movie, you need someone to believe in your delusion as much as you do. And Channing was just always there, always game.
Daniel D'Addario, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You are our ace cover story writer. You are so good at getting people to open up and talk about their craft and their lives, and you certainly did not disappoint with this great cover story tied to the Toronto Film Festival about one of the fall's most intriguing new films, Roofman. Tell me where you found star Channing Tatum and director Derek Cianfrance in their lives and in their careers as you all sat down to tell the story of this film.
This was a really interesting story to report because Channing Tatum, I think of as the guy from Magic Mike or 21 Jump Street, fun-loving, a goofball. No, he's lived a lot of life since then. Those movies were almost 15 years ago. And at 45, he is extremely reflective about the kind of career he wants to have and the kind of work he wants to be doing, not least because he is a dad and any job means time away from his daughter, whom he cherishes. So he wants to do stuff that is not just formulaic and the stuff he'd been offered. At the same time, Derek Cianfrance, his director, who lives in New York, also took a bit of a break and also had been reflecting on what kind of stories he wanted to tell after having told a bunch of stories that struck a similar note of parent-child inheritance. So 2 people for whom being a dad is a big part of their identity, coming together to tell this story about a man who is motivated by the love of his daughter to go on a kind of rollicking crime spree. And I think people will be surprised. It allows Tatum to be funny, which we know he can do, but also he's very melancholy and thoughtful, and it's just a real star turn in the best way.
Channing Tatum speaks so openly about what it's like to be a working actor and also trying to be a dad at the same time. It really sounds like he was quite emotional in talking about this.
It's hard not to be, as any parent knows, get a little emotional when talking about your kids, but he was very interested in connecting about our respective experiences as parents. Obviously, my life and his are very different, but there's a certain leveling effect. Having a child who his daughter is now 12 has prompted him to do some real reflection about the kind of work he wants to be doing. He took 4 years off the business entirely and didn't work. And I think coming back happily, he was able to be in a couple things that connected. And this feels like his big reassertion of, this is phase 2 of my career. This is the kind of work I want to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Also, when you sat down with him, as you say in the story, he's still dealing with a significant leg injury.
To not acknowledge the passage of time is a fool's errand. He told me, when I look at myself in the mirror, I see a 26-year-old. I feel like I'm 26. But he was significantly injured while working on the next Avengers film, which comes out next year. He walked in with a very heavy limp and sat with his leg outstretched. And it was just a reminder that being 45 is different than being 26 or being 30. I will always see him as the actor from Magic Mike and from 21 Jump Street and Foxcatcher, but is that in fact limiting for him and for me as an audience member? And so Roofman, being the reinvention that it is exciting. He says that he feels like it's going to kick off a decade-long run of great roles for him, which would take him into the heart of middle age. So that should be very interesting to see what he does next.
Remind us now, he's in Avengers world now for a couple of more films?
He has been filming Avengers Doomsday, featuring the return of Robert Downey Jr. It should be very interesting to see because he's playing a character that he's wanted to play for a very long time. One of the X-Men named Gambit.
Let's talk about Derek, the director. There's a great passage in the story where the two of you walk around Brooklyn.
He is a very interesting guy to speak to because he puts a great deal of thought into his work. And like Tatum, he took a significant break. So after working very hard to build up his early career, working very hard to bring Blue Valentine to the screen, he made a few films in quick succession, made a TV series for HBO, and then felt as though as he puts it, his well was empty. He didn't have an idea and he didn't want to force it. And so speaking to him about the ways in which this true life story slowly dawned on him as a potential feature film and the ways in which he could make it feel like his own was a really interesting conversation.
As you report in the story, he, as a director, he has a very specific working style and it's very spare.
He takes pride in the fact, for instance, that he does not use trailers on the set. He doesn't believe in them. He believes it creates a hierarchy. So everyone's just on set. The added benefit of this is that when actors are just on set, they often find themselves working in ways they didn't expect. A key comic set piece in the film has Tatum dressed up in all the gear that he finds around the Toys R Us, roller skates, big sunglasses, boa. And that just happened because Tatum was bored sitting around and just wanted to play. It made its way into the film. So he's very used to working lean and rapidly on a very tight budget. He refurbished and abandoned Toys R Us in North Carolina to look as though it were its Toys R Us heyday 20 years ago, back before the company had gone filed for bankruptcy. So it's that authenticity. They're not doing half a set and doubling it.
Truth really is stranger than fiction. This is about a man named Jeffrey Manchester who robbed McDonald's locations and lived covertly in a working Toys R Us store. He burrowed himself in and lived there, slept there at night. It's a wild story, and it also seems somehow emblematic of our times.
The economy is a huge part of the film. Jeff Manchester does his crimes because he can't get ahead economically. He wants his daughter to have toys. He wants his daughter to have stuff. And he's not able to do that on his salary. And so he knocks over 40 to 60 McDonald's franchises. He just feels like he can never get ahead and he wants so badly to impress his kid. And I think that's a really moving and compelling element of the story.
Dan, thank you for diving in. I'm going to get a lot of attention at Toronto this week.
Thank you for having me. This was a really fun story to report.
Now here's Elsa Keslassy from Paris. She's just back from covering the Venice Film Festival, which launched a lot of ships into the FYCC. After the Hunt, Begonia, The Smashing Machine, and Wizard of the Kremlin all got an award season boost at Venice. Julia Roberts, Dwayne Johnson, and Emma Stone were among the stars who lit up the Lido. Listen all the way to the end of this episode for a choice bite from Julia Roberts from her After the Hunt presser at Venice. Elsa Keslassy, our international editor in Paris. You are just back from Venice. Elsa, tell us everything. What was it like on the Lido this year?
Hi, or may I say ciao? It was, magical as always to be in Venice. You had a big lineup, so it was really cool. It's still a smaller festival as always than Cannes, just because you don't have the whole of the industry in town. The red carpet is not as crazy as it is in Cannes. You don't have the film market as you have in Cannes, so it doesn't draw as much of the industry, but it certainly draws all the stars.
There is no question that Hollywood has seized this as a huge launch pad, and for obvious reasons. What were people talking about in terms of the business of making movies?
That was definitely one of the topics that were addressed during the festival at press conferences and in interviews, was how difficult it is today to finance an independent film. And Yorgos Lanthimos mentioned it during his press conference, talking about Bugonia, which is a remake of a South Korean movie. And he talked about how it is difficult to finance original independent movies that are not based on like huge franchises. And it's interesting because for someone like him, who's had such critical acclaim, who's been at the Oscar, even for someone like him, it's not easy to finance a movie without a studio on board. And I also talked to some French filmmakers. I spoke to François Ozon and to Olivier Assayas, who both have movies in competition. And they both say that they really, really struggle to make their movies.
To hear that from bold-faced name is really significant. From my vantage point in LA, it was also very clear that Gaza was a big issue in Venice.
So there was actually a protest in Venice that was pretty impressive to show support for Gaza. I think it was one of the most impressive protests I've seen at a festival for Gaza so far, even comparing it to Berlin. It really filled the Lido.
And climate change is definitely bearing down on the festival. Last year, you were all boiling. This year, it was a different climactic condition.
The funny thing is, although the 2 years were so different, the common thing that happened is that I could not blow dry my hair at all. So I looked like a crazy woman the entire festival, because last year was incredibly humid and hot. It was insane. And this year it was like a torrential rain that I've never seen before. Never, ever seen. It was like a tropical kind of rain. And so no one was prepared because everyone had PTSD from last year.
Let's talk about the movies that impressed you.
And I would say the first one is Yorgos Lanthimos' movie Bugonia with Emma Stone. That one, almost for sure it's going to show up in multiple categories, I would say. And the other one is Benny Safdie's movie, The Smashing Machine, with Dwayne Johnson, because that one got more than 10 minutes of standing ovation. The other movie that really impressed me is Olivier Assayas' movie, The Wizard of the Kremlin, which is a political thriller starring Jude Law as Vladimir Putin, and Paul Dano, who's his former right-hand man and spin doctor. And that movie earned like a hugely enthusiastic standing ovation. And it really impressed me.
That is a bold subject to take on in this world, I will say.
Even for someone who has no interest in Russian politics and Vladimir Putin, it is really hugely entertaining.
Let me conclude by asking you, Julia Roberts, After the Hunt. I read everything that was written about this. I'm endlessly fascinated by her. This was a real springboard for this movie. How was it received?
So it was received, with a standing ovation that lasted 6 minutes. People were really enthusiastic. Some of them were very puzzled. I spoke to different critics who interpreted the ending very different ways. It's a thriller that will really get people talking for sure, especially because it's a controversial look at Me Too. And Julia Roberts, she was in tears at the premiere. She was extremely moved. It's really a big comeback to dramatic roles. We haven't seen her like that since Erin Brockovich. So it's really a movie that could propel her in the awards race for sure.
Elsa, where are you headed next?
I'm headed to Deauville, actually, the Deauville American Film Festival. They're launching an industry program, and they have a lot of big titles this year. And I'm going to see Pamela Anderson, who's going to get an award there. Kristen Stewart is going to present her movie that was in Cannes. Also, Kim Novak, who just got an award in Venice, will be in Deauville.
Elsa, thank you so much for working tirelessly for Variety.
Thank you.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. If you love Variety's 70th anniversary feature on Disneyland in July, you need to keep an eye out for Disneyland Handcrafted. The documentary appears to have amazing, rarely seen footage capturing the construction of the happiest place on Earth out of orange fields in Anaheim in the early 50s. The project from filmmaker Leslie Iwerks, that's a name that has resonance in Disney lore, comes to Disney Plus and Disney YouTube this winter. Here's a documentary made for my colleague Carol Horst, Saquon, a feature doc about Eagles running back Saquon Barkley, premieres October 9th on Amazon's Prime Video. Comedian Veer Das has set a residency at Lincoln Center Theater. His new show, Hey Stranger, will run October 29th to November 9th. It's a milestone for an Indian comedian. My colleague Naman Ramachandran has the scoop that you can find on Variety.com right now. Before we go, congrats to Jessie Abbott. She's joined A&E Studios as VP of Creative Affairs. She spent the past decade at Aaron Kaplan's Capital Entertainment, working her way up from assistant to VP. Also, special birthday shout-out going out today to one Lauren Van Asdale. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Dan Didario and Elsa Keslassy. It was edited by Aaron Greenwald. Sticks, Nicks, Hick, Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.
You realize what you believe in strongly and what your convictions are because we stir it all up for you. So you're welcome.